London is not just some city. Its spirit stands outside of time. Certain places have influenced its citizens. It is not only a setting, but a presence, a character in various films, novels, and poems. My name is Philipp Röttgers, and I search for London's spirit. I think there are two particular ways to explore the powerful and mysterious place that is London: through literature and through walking. Follow me into a secret world. Follow me to London beyond time and place. In this series, I will explore its spirit by walking the city and talking to London enthusiasts. I invite you to join me. Together, we will discover London beyond time and place. This is Talks Beyond Time and Place. Hello everybody to Talks Beyond Time and Place. My name is Philipp Röttgers and my guest today is Harry Hickmore. Welcome, Harry. I hope I said that right. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
You did. You're perfect. Thank
Great.
you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.
I have to apologize in advance for some strange noises because we've had some heavy snow here in Germany these last few days, and today the sun is out and it's all coming off the roof. So if there's some thunder-like noise in the background, that's just snow coming off the roof. So yeah. Okay, as I said, my guest today is Harry Hickmore, and Harry is Head of Development and Communications at Wilton's Music Hall. And I'm very happy to have you here today, Harry. Today's talk will be all about Wilton's and its history. And for those of you that don't know, Wilton's Music Hall can be found in Grace's Alley off Cable Street in Whitechapel. Is it Whitechapel? Is it Shadwell? Where do you consider yourself to be?
That is a very good question.
We
straddle both of those beautiful boroughs. So I think technically we're Shadwell.
Okay.
But you know, if it's the right time in the month, we might say we're in Whitechapel. So either you're fine with.
Great. Well, let's just say Tower Hamlets. I think we cover everything with that. So,
that as well.
So Wilton's Music Hall is believed to be the oldest surviving music hall in Europe, I think, and it was built in the 1740s as an alehouse first, and then in 1839 a concert room was built behind the bar, and that was greatly enlarged by the new owner John Wilton, who opened it in 1859 as a music hall where all the great Victorian artists performed. And it has not always been a music hall since then. And Harry and I will dig deeper into the history of Wilton's throughout our conversation. But my first question to Harry is, how long have you been part of the team at Wilton's?
Well, not since 1859.
That would have been an interesting talk then.
So I've worked at Wilton's since 2018.
Oh yeah, okay.
And it's interesting because before I worked at Wilton's, I worked at the London Coliseum, which is another great hall of variety, or was built as such in the early 20th century. I used to work at English National Opera, which was its home was at the London Coliseum. So I went from one variety hall to another. Very different, but so yes, I've been there since 2018.
Great. Is there anything particular that drew you to Wilton's Music Hall? I mean, that's too private. You just have to let me know. I'm going to edit this part out then. But
no. Look, Wilton's, as you beautifully explained, has this incredible, potted, magnificent, dramatic history.
Right.
And I was drawn to all of that, and it is this extraordinary, irreplaceable, unique building. It is the world's oldest surviving grand music hall, and that's the terminology that we go for.
Yeah,
and it has an amazing atmosphere and presence. And I remember I had been going to see shows there before I joined as an employee. And you go in and you sort of can't believe it's still standing.
Right. Yes.
It feels just, it's not, I don't like the word decaying, but it has all of these layers of history that are on the walls. But from the very moment you walk in the front door, through the old concert room, the old Prince of Denmark's mahogany bar, to the music hall itself, John Wilton's beautiful structure. And it just has such a character.
Right.
And I joined at a time when the artistic programme was really expanding, and we had everyone from, indeed, English National Opera to a new play by one of this country's leading playwrights, to Ballet Boys for an amazing ballet company in London. We just had so much incredible there was so much incredible programming going on there in this incredible space with all this amazing history, that my job is to fundraise, sell tickets, to communicate what we're doing to audiences.
Yeah,
it was a sort of perfect opportunity because there's so much material in building. So that's why I ended up moving, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah, I really understand what you mean and what you feel, because when I was there 1 or 2 times, or maybe more often, I don't know, but the first time I walked in there, I was like, oh yeah, this is great, this is awesome. This strange, this same kind of feeling. So you already mentioned John Wilton. I already mentioned him, and he was basically the founder of Wilton's Music Hall, because it is still named after him to this day. So who was John Wilton?
Who was John Wilton? That's a fantastic question. If only we had more information, if only he was around to tell us about the amazing, extraordinary things he did for that bit of London, and indeed for entertainment in that bit of London back in the 1850s and 60s. Wilton's is really interesting because before John Wilton arrived on the scene, it had a concert room, and this concert room was somewhere that was used and it was busy, but the previous owners to John Wilton couldn't really balance the books. They couldn't make it work financially. Back in the 1840s, from 1843, if you were a place where you put on entertainment, you either had to decide whether you were going to do proper stage plays, and if you did that, you weren't able to sell alcohol and make money from alcohol, or you could do what John Wilton decided to do and build a theatre where you put on light, in inverted commas, entertainment, but you'd also have people serving drinks. And that's actually more the sort of atmosphere you get in every theatre, in my opinion, nowadays. So John Wilton was a bit of a visionary, but he was amazing. And he had this incredible wife called Ellen who helped him out with everything. She was the real backbone of the business. And they, decided in 1853 to build a music hall. And they built one. And because it was so popular, they knocked it down and built a bigger one. Both of these at the back of the 4 houses off Grace's Alley that make up the front of Wilton's, that John Wilton gradually acquired. And yes, from 1859, it was March 1859 when the building, the space opened. It very quickly became one of the leading music halls, and there were hundreds of music halls across London at the time. People are surprised by that fact now because you find so few, because they were bombed or repurposed. But actually, Wilton's was one of many, but still it managed to draw in this extraordinary roster of artists, everyone from acrobats like Madame Senya and George Laybourne, of course, very famous musical variety performer. And that was because John Wilton, there was really
Champagne Charlie, right? There was
indeed. That was, yes, it was indeed. And we have a Champagne Charlie room now at Wilton's. But so John Wilton just built up a reputation, and it was one of the places where people knew they were going to have a good time, and that's so important now as it was back in the 1850s and 60s.
Right.
So yes, he was a real trailblazer.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you already basically mentioned it. It was not always a music hall, and then there were different stages of building the music hall and the whole complex. So it started as a bar, then the concert room was added. And can you tell us a bit about the various stages of building, even up until today?
Oh God, well, this is the thing. This is the interesting thing about Wilton's. It's had such a potted history. The buildings that were sort of its foundation were actually built in 1690. So the Grace's Alley was for much of the 18th century a shopping street. You know, there was everything from a butcher to a baker, a cheesemonger, a jeweler, a barrel maker, perfumer.
Wow.
It was a real sort of hub. And gradually numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4 were acquired in the end by John Wilton, but prior to that people like Matthew Eltham, and yes, it sort of gradually became a place of entertainment, and it was a music hall until 1881, at which point it was sold to a Methodist Mission. And it was actually retained as a Methodist mission until after the Second World War. So it was actually a Methodist mission longer than it was a music hall. So it is quite strange that it had a very fleeting history really as a music hall, but that spirit, be it of variety, of performance, of shelter, of refuge, that really stuck with it. And through the 1920s, it also moonlighted, I suppose, as an Ethiopian working men's club. You mentioned Cable Street, Philipp, in your introduction. Wilton's was a refuge for anti-fascists during the Battle of Cable Street in 1936. It was also an air raid shelter. It has really gone through many different stages, and actually that post-war moment was a really important moment for it as a building, because the area around the hall was destroyed. The land was erased. We have these amazing photos of the area of Wilton's after the Second World War, and it is a bomb site. And then standing in the middle is Wilton's, the 4 houses of Grace's Alley, and a few sort of broken walls around it. So it's a real stroke of luck, a miracle that Wilton still stands. And actually after the war, it had a really tough time deciding what it wanted to be, if you want to personalize it. And it became a rag warehouse, a cotton mill, and then in the 70s and the 80s, various theatrical figures started nosing around, I suppose, if you like it. And you had people like John Betchman, Laurence Olivier, Liza Minnelli, Ian McKellen, still alive and still lives in the area, started getting involved and started trying to convince people that this was a building now derelict that was worth saving. And it would actually take until 2011 for the various fundraising campaigns to bear fruit. And it was at that point that enough money was raised to actually begin a proper, what was 4-year conservation and restoration of the building that took 4 million quid, 2 million pounds of which was from Heritage Lottery Fund, the other 2 million pounds from people who were wealthy and really loved the building. And yes, and then it reopened, trying to incorporate all of the history, both in the architecture. So one of the extraordinary things about Wilton's is that it isn't restored necessarily. It was just that moment in time, all of the crumbling walls were conserved, and we said, this is how Wilton's is going to look, and we're going to preserve all of these layers of history. And yes, in 2015, the building reopened, and since then we've been building it up in terms of being a space for extraordinary theatre and music, and somewhere where, well, before the pandemic, over 70,000 people would visit us each year.
Yeah.
So yes, it really has had an extraordinary history.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, but I think it's important to keep these layers of history in the building itself, because this is what we have had in the beginning. This is what creates this atmosphere. And are there any original features still there from the 19th century? I think there are, probably.
Yeah. So yeah, there are sort of pride and joy as you go into the auditorium. There are these cast iron barley twists, which are well, I suppose they're about 10 foot high, and they hold up the balcony. And they were part of the original structure in 1859. Wilton's actually was quite badly damaged in a fire in 1877, and lots of the original, I suppose, plasterwork was ripped out. But these amazing cast iron barley twists, the fire couldn't penetrate them, and they stand tall. And they were the foundations upon which John Wilton was able to rebuild the theatre in exactly the same way as it had been originally built. So yeah, the barley twists are really special, and they're very, very unique for a theatre to have. And actually, we have some seats where you're sort of sat behind a barley twist. And usually, if you have an obstructed view in the theatre, you get a bit annoyed, and you might have to put the price down on those seats or something. But I always say, you know, it's a privilege to sit behind those barley twists. They are pieces of history.
Yes.
So yes, and you know, the external brickwork, all of that is original. I think that's what people love about it. Right.
Yeah. Do you know what the first performance ever was at Wilton's?
So, well, it was well, it was an evening of variety. So most of the performances at Wilton's in the 1850s, the 1860s, the 1870s, they would have been sort of quite long evenings of various acts performing. So yes, we do have the opening night roll call.
Great.
And everyone, I can't remember the names for my shame, but it's, you know, people like George Laybourne, lots of singers, acrobatic acts, cabaret, burlesque dancers were on the roster on the opening night. It really was. I think that's actually partly why the hall became quite popular and well known immediately. Was that it did have this sort of fanfare of an opening night, and it did get reported upon quite a lot in the press. So we still have some lovely archive material, some newspaper cuttings from the day after, talking about this new hall and the potential for raucous entertainment and all of that. So yeah, it's a very fun opening night was had, I think.
I would have loved to have been there. So would have been very, very interesting, very nice. And yeah, it's also interesting what we've also basically just said a bit. I like this idea of there's a spirit of place at certain sites, you know, in certain sites inhabit a certain spirit, and the spirit of Grace's Alley or Wilton's seems to be one of entertainment. I mean, even if it was a Methodist mission in between and a warehouse, then it always came back. It started as an alehouse, and then it became, in the end, it became the music hall again. I think this isn't just, there seems to be something at this side. So do you know why it became a Methodist mission for since?
No, actually, I think it was very, very simple in that in 1881, the owners, who weren't at that point John and Ellen Wilton, they were new owners, they had got to a point where music hall and variety wasn't having the same popularity as it had enjoyed earlier on in the century. The owners at that time put it down to the exodus of sailors from the area. So lots of those punters who were propping up the place and enjoying it most nights had left the area. The area was changing, and indeed the area had a really strong Methodist following and population. So it went on sale, and a Methodist mission decided to purchase it. And it's actually from 1881 to about 1888. That period in Wilton's history, that early Methodist period, is really the few years that we know least about. It's actually very interesting.
Yeah.
And then we have loads of material actually from later on in the Methodists' residence, if you like, there. We have all the sermons from that period in our archive. But yes, the reason why they picked Wilton's, I think that was perhaps just that a building was up for sale that would, that you could have a congregation in there.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So yes, an interesting little bit of our history, definitely.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting. I never really thought about it, that it was for a long time it was a mission and it was a music hall. Never really thought about it. That's really interesting. So which stars have been playing at Wilton's from back then up to now? I think you've had some stars, basically recent stars, also on stage.
Yes, we've been a concert venue to Kate Bush and Brian Ferry. We had the sort of landmark moment in Wilton's theatrical history was in 1997, when a director, quite an eminent director called Deborah Warner, put on a production of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. And it was a production starring Fiona Shaw. Sure. Fiona Shaw, now, again, very, very famous award-winning British actress. And this story is told so many times. I feel like so many people saw that production that it feels like I was there. But in 1997, the hall was still very derelict. And Deborah Warner and Fiona Shaw said, no, we want to do this at Wilton's, we will do it. We want to do it in winter. And at that point, Wilton's didn't really have any central heating system. And there were also very large gaping holes in the roof. So it was like being outside.
Yeah.
Yes, it was at that point a crumbling building. And if you look at the press reviews from that production, aside from the praise that Fiona Shaw and Deborah Warner get for their production of The Wasteland, the thing that you take away is the temperature in the hall that night and the dust. And I think on the posters for the production, punters' audiences were advised to bring hats and scarves.
Yeah, yeah.
The critics went one step further and said, you know what, you need to bring hard hats as well, because again, we have board members still who were there on the night, that do recount the dust and the debris. So, but it was a moment, and lots of people remember it, and it really accelerated the the hall's regeneration and accelerated the amount of interest that was generated around it. And yes, and since then, you know, we have gradually enticed more and more theatre and music stars to join us. So yes,
there must have been an interesting performance to see under these circumstances. But as you say, many people remember that, so it must have it's still in their minds. It must have been
and we have
quite an impact.
We're talking about that it being a memorable performance. Indeed, we have these photos of it. I think the thing that most strikes me is that Fiona Shaw was only wearing a t-shirt for it.
I was just wondering,
been absolutely freezing, poor thing. So I think, yes, I think it was memorable for many reasons.
Yeah, but I think she was probably, when she was acting and when she was on stage, she didn't feel the cold. I don't think you feel the cold then. It's just you're in the moment. Yeah. So what would you say, if one can answer this question? I mean, how culturally important were the music halls for London and for London's history in general? I mean, you said there were so many, and Wilton's was also important for the area. So what would you say? Why were they so popular and important?
Well, look, I sort of compare it. They were like what the TV and the pub is to Londoners in the 21st century.
Yeah,
you know, it was the popular entertainment of the day. It's sometimes very difficult for people to imagine that actually the only way you got entertainment really, because there weren't TVs or radios inside the home, you know, you went out to these music halls to be entertained. So they really were of absolute utmost cultural importance. And at that point, yes, we did have the Royal Opera House had just been built, and the West End theatres were beginning to be built. But actually, music halls really predate lots of those theatres, concert halls, opera houses. They were sort of everything. And it wasn't just, what's interesting, we have these amazing sketches of the hall with people and artists and acts inside the auditorium. And the spread, I suppose, of audience is really interesting. You have everyone from sailors and local men and women to men in top hats who have probably come from the West End to the East End for a bit of hearty entertainment. So yes, they really were these sort of social melting pots and cultural melting pots. And yes, actually, music hall song and comedy infused entertainment for a very long time. You know, if you think some of the comic acts of especially the late 20th century, your Victoria Woods, your Morecambe and Wises, they really took a lot of their inspiration from your George Laybournes.
Right.
And so I think we have a lot to thank music halls for. And it is a shame, I think, that there's not that much of an audience for music hall variety entertainment anymore.
Yeah.
But that's why, you know, what we do at Wilton's, we repurpose that spirit of variety in more modern, applicable forms like music, ballet, theatre, opera. So I think we have a lot to thank music halls for.
Yes, definitely. I think so too. And it's also a bit of identification. I think these songs, they somewhere I read, and I think it's quite appropriate to say that these songs were the true songs of London. You know, they kind of defined a bit what a Cockney is, maybe, or modern Cockney back then, and what we believe to be typically Cockney. And they also reflected the living conditions a bit in some, you know, in the audiences, and maybe also in the comic, in the sketches, and in these things. And it was, of course, it helped people out of the monotony of their everyday life, especially back then. So yeah, it's I would sometimes. Do you still kind of perform these old music hall tunes and songs sometimes at Wilton's today?
Yes, no, of course, they're still part of our program. We have the most amazing performer called Tom Carradine, who does a Cockney sing-along.
Yeah.
And it always sells out immediately.
Yeah.
So yes, there's definitely still an audience for it. And we've had acts still who draw upon music hall. So yes, it's always going to be a part of our program.
Yeah, interesting. But it's interesting that it's sold out. People are still interested in this kind of program, and I would go to see one of these too. Yeah, sure. And yeah, this is maybe also I read somewhere that especially in the East End, or the most music halls could be found in the East End compared to other parts of London. So I found this quite interesting too, that theater is a part of the East End's identity, and also was very important for the area. I mean, yeah, as I said, Wilton's for the area of around Cable Street, and this is just interesting to see the history of a place, and to see what is important and what recurring topics appear there. So what is the difference between like a visit to Wilton's today than to the 19th century? Are there similarities? Are there differences?
I wish we were allowed to maybe simulate the kind of experience you would have got in the 19th century. Let's be frank. Wilton's was a place of raucous entertainment.
Yeah.
I think one of the joys that we have now is the walls and our building give this sense of all the extraordinary things that will have happened in that building, with that atmosphere. So to give some sense of the scale of the building, nowadays, the max capacity we can have seated is around about 360 people.
Okay, yeah.
So every night in the 1850s and 60s, there would have been over 1,000 people in that same space.
Okay, yeah.
And some of them still seated. So what that meant was that it was densely populated, to put it lightly. There would have been areas that would have been, full of people having a great time, drinking, socializing. It really was, it would have been the absolute epicenter of entertainment and social life for adults at that time. So yes, I sometimes think it would have been a bit like a club in a way.
Probably, yeah.
Actually, yes, in 2019 we did run a club night at Wilton's as a one-off. So I suppose there was a bit of that. But yes, and it would have, people would have perhaps come in and out of the theatre a bit more. Perhaps, I think we're still a relaxed building, but there was definitely more of a sense of it being a public house.
Right, yeah.
Back then, it was very, it really was. It was a sociable place.
Yeah.
It was,
So, what kind of audiences do you have today? Maybe also in comparison to back then, if you can compare that.
I would have loved to been able to talk to the people that used to go in the 19th century. Our audience today is really eclectic. We have quite a strong local audience. Around about 10 to 20% of our audience come from the immediate local area. And otherwise, very London centric. And also, of course, you get day trippers again before COVID. So yes, and a whole gamut of ages really. We have everyone from 8-9-year-olds coming to see our Christmas show to your 80-90-year-old coming to see their favourite bit of theatre or ballet or whatever it is. So it's a real it's a real mix, and definitely what people say about coming to Wilton's is that it doesn't discriminate. It's a very open space and it's very relaxed, and you're not out of place if you come in a suit and tie. You're not out of place if you come in a t-shirt and shorts.
Yeah, right.
So, and that's something we're really proud of.
Yes, that's lovely. Sure. Back then, I was wondering, were women allowed to come to the music halls? Yes, they were.
Yes, yeah. I'm not sure. No, I think they could have. Yes, they would have come on their own accord at times. They might have come as guests. But again, the depictions of the hall that we have at Wilton's in our archive show that yes, women were definitely a part of our audience.
Yeah, great. So you already mentioned a bit of the of what you put on stage today. So how do you plan your own productions? I mean, there's plays and theater and music and rock shows, as you said. So how do you plan the production? Well, how do you plan it?
Yeah, so we have about 80 different productions a year, and that amounts to about 400 performances. Again, this is all in a dreamland where there's not coronavirus going around.
Right. Let's just pretend it's not there right now. If it was
only,
business.
if only. So yes, God, how does that program get put together? Well, I suppose we split it up into autumn, spring, and summer, and we take a bit of a break in August. We have lots of weddings at that time. Wilton's a very renowned wedding venue as well. And then we basically work with lots of production companies, be they theatre or music, and a lot of people want to work at Wilton's because it's a really extraordinary space, and we often are part of tours. So a play might have been in Oxford, and then it might have moved to Newcastle, and then it might have its London run at Wilton's. We do lots of that. And yes, I think there has to be a sense of magic about a production to really work at Wilton's. That's definitely what we look for. And yes, and all of the rest of it.
Yeah.
And we also have we do our own Christmas show every year as well.
Okay.
Which is now very, very, very well renowned. It's sort of one of the most well-known places to come and see a Christmas show in the country. So yes, it's a very complex sort of jigsaw programming, but we get there in the end.
Yeah, sure. Wilton's was also used as a location for several films. I've read that, like Interview with a Vampire and one of the Sherlock Holmes movies, I think, with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law. So and also for music videos, like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, I think. So
that's the one.
Yeah. Right. Can you tell us a bit about that? Why and how these things happen?
Yeah, so a lot of them were filmed in the 80s and 90s when the building was just sort of getting back up on its feet, I suppose, again. So yes, Wilton's was often used as a venue for filming at that time, especially before the millennium.
Yeah,
was really crumbling, falling down. So it was places that location scouts liked for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We have also this another amazing example of it being used in a film was it was used for the 1990 film The Krays, about the Kray twins, two notorious gangsters in East London. And actually the whole hall, as part of it, this would not be allowed to happen today, the whole hall was painted red.
Ooh.
All painted red, so it would look like, well, it was the scene of the Regency Club, which is where the Braves went to do their business. So there's this scene in the film in this deep blood almost red room, and that is Wilton's. Again, that is, it's grade 2 star listed now, so that's not allowed, but you still actually have the bits of red from it coming through, as I've said, in the, you know how we the hall was painted over many times, the final color being a blue in the noughties, and then it sort of crumbled, so it leaves these flecks of red and brown and blue and all of that.
Well,
so
that's nice.
So, yeah, it is. But again, we wouldn't let any production company do the same again. In more recent times, we've had films like The Danish Girl and The Suffragettes, which was the 2015 film, be filmed there, and actually very timely, because one thing we have been doing whilst we've been closed to the public during the pandemic is that we have been renting space for film and TV production hire. So actually we have a major motion picture coming in a few weeks' time with 3 extremely high profile actors that they're going to shoot a scene at Wilton's, and you know, that will probably take about 5 days, or there'll be a few days of prep, and then 1 day of filming, and then maybe 1 day of winding down. So we still like to offer ourselves up for film and TV production hire now, if we have the time.
I mean, that's right now it's a good time for things like that. You're gonna have to tell us once it is official what film it was and which actors.
It's very exciting. It's really exciting. But
we're not gonna mention it. You won't tell me, and so there's gonna be no problem. So that's interesting. I'm looking forward to that. You already mentioned a bit like some of the surprising facts and the interesting performances, like the one with Fiona Shaw. So I thought about asking, like, what was a very surprising fact that you've learned, or the strangest story that you've heard, but probably they were already mentioned. So but if you have another one,
I'm now racking my brains, Philip. Yes, no the history of Wilton's is a history of strange and interesting stories. I think
it no matter if you can't think of anything. We've already had that.
I've given you all my material. That's the thing. Yes, it's. I think I love that. In a way, I love that we had this bit of our history where we were a refuge and a shelter. You know, it's not something we often think about Wilton's being a place of variety and entertainment, but actually it was also a place. The East End is a place where immigrants and people who were a bit hard up would come to settle. You know, and we still try and embody that in the sort of welcoming nature of Wilton's. So actually, for me, when I joined, the most surprising thing, honestly, was all of the little nuggets of history that together have built this building and this organization that it is today. So it's very thrilling working for somewhere where every day you see a new bit of material that tells you something new that is new to you about the place where you're working.
I think it's interesting, as you just mentioned, the craze. They probably knew, of course, the building and the area, and then a couple of years later, a film is being made at a location that they probably didn't go there because it was a mission then, but they knew the area. I think things like that are also quite interesting. And of course, there's this bit, but only a tiny bit of a connection to Jack the Ripper, because he was hanging around in the neighborhood. But yeah, of course, when he was on the roads, on the streets, the Wiltons was already a mission. So yeah, but sometimes you get to read about Wiltons in these Ripper books and Ripper essays. Yeah, are there any ghosts at Wiltons?
Yes,
Of course.
Well, I say that with trepidation, but there are, as I'm sure you can imagine, there are numerous stories about ghost sightings. I haven't seen a ghost, but yes, it can be quite spooky if you're in the building late at night.
Oh yes.
Yes, it can be spooky.
Yes, I really believe that. So, what is the current situation like at Wiltons during the pandemic?
It's been tough. It's been tough. You know, we did have, like all performing arts organisations, you get very excited about your artistic plans, and we were very excited about lots of developments that were happening in 2020 and 2021, back at the start of last year. And yes, we've had to rethink and cancel and reschedule and all of that. So yes, it's been really tough, and we have lost a lot of money, but Wiltons is a resilient place.
Yes.
And we have faced many a crisis in our long history, and in England, as we get closer, however slowly, to a point where theatres can reopen, Wiltons, we're going to reopen as soon as we're allowed. We are ready with shows. We just need to be given a date. So as soon as we can go in with socially distant audiences, our doors will be open again.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, it's on the website that even there are shows on, and you can see already which shows are planned. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to, and I hope that you can reopen soon. You can open your doors soon. So I think you're also an independent charity. So there's no you sort of survive through raising funds from donations and sales and things like that. So what can our viewers and listeners do to support Wiltons right now, Harry?
Oh wow, perfect. No, well, if anyone's got £1 million out there and they'd like to give to Wiltons, that would be lovely.
Sure. Maybe.
Yes, who knows? But also, people that want to donate £1 or £10 or £100, they can do so by going on our website. And all of that money that we are raising right now is money that goes directly into our reopening fund. And that will enable us to keep our amazing building open for visitors to see and for people to come and enjoy performances. So yes, it is really a place where every single pound makes a big difference to what we're able to do. Right,
yeah. And I think you still have famous supporters. I think I saw a video on YouTube with Cate Blanchett. Maybe that was about something else, but she was also asking people to donate to Wiltons. I really like that. So yeah, you still have these famous supporters.
Yes, if you can be you'll be on the same level as Cate if you can give us £10. No, yes, and we do, and it's a place that is loved. Everyone from Sir David Suchet, who many people know, Poirot, who lives just down the road from Wiltons and is extremely involved, and again Cate Blanchett highlighted Wilton's when she was interviewed by Vogue a few months ago as part of a piece about London theatres, and yes, you know, but that's the thing, you can have Kate Blanchett or David Suchet enjoy Wilton's, but you know, so can you or me, Philip.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
everyone.
And we do. Yes. Yeah.
We do.
Great. So what are the next projects and productions going to be once the doors are open again?
That's a really good question. So our original plan back last summer was to reopen the building between January and March now, basically, with a 10-week season of, I suppose, stripped down shows. So plays and concerts with 1 or 2 or 3 performers to enable social distancing both on stage and in the audience.
Yes.
That all got moved. So we're doing most of that in the summer and the autumn. And we have everyone from our favourites, like the Tiger Lilies to Camille O'Sullivan. And we've got amazing few new productions, a new opera before the end of the year, and an incredible ensemble who actually did work at English National Opera when I was there, who are coming. So yes, fingers crossed if we're in a position to be able to do that. But you know, as soon as we're able to reopen, we'll be back with our amazing program. That's the plan.
I'm really looking forward to that, and so does everyone else, I think. So thank you very much, Harry. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on Talks Beyond Time and Place and talk about Wilton's Music Hall. And I wish you and Wilton's all the best, and that you can open your doors again soon. Is there anything final, some story that you want to tell? Anything that I forgot to ask, maybe?
No, I'm all storied out. I think you've got all of them. No, look, we're very proud of the building and its place in the East End of London and its place in London and Britain. And yes, you're right, Philip, it is about spirit of place, and it's something we often think about. And and we've got to preserve that, because as long as humans have been around, they've wanted to be entertained. And people in whatever forms will want to be entertained. So Wilton's will stand as long as people want to be entertained. Yes.
Yeah, but you're really right. It has to be preserved, and I think you're doing a wonderful job, all of you, in doing that. It's an impressive history and impressive what you've made of it to this day. Yes. So thank you very much, Harry Hickmore.